She thought, their name. Remember their name. So we've heard that cry over the last couple of years. So forget their name. So this is the story. I'm moving. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Either side of the quilt. You're
Okay.
focused.
All right. Here we go. All right. I'm gonna put my glasses on, and I have a script here so that we don't get lost, because you can easily get lost in this book. And so this quilt is called Women of War, Women Who Survived Internment During World War II. And the booklet is divided into 3 sections. The first section are stories in Europe. And the second section is stories in the Philippines. And the third section of the book is liberation, so that we can keep our stories straight. I often forget, we battled 2 wars simultaneously in Europe and in the Philippines. When they bombed Pearl Harbor, they didn't want Pearl Harbor. It was a ruse, some ruse. Anyway, I forget that this country, battled 2 wars at the same time. So we're going to touch on them. The very first story on this quilt is not on the quilt. So we'll just look at the big screen. And it comes from Katie Pykars. She was a Polish national. She lived down the road from us in Great Falls, Montana. And Katie told my mom this quick story. We had rules. So she said, we had rules at home. We always had to be home by 6 o'clock. If we didn't come home, our parents knew something terrible had happened. So I was 13 when the Nazis came into Poland, but when I was 15, I was taken to Germany to work as a slave laborer on a farm. Now, Daddy made me wear winter boots every single day to school. And when we went to school that one morning, Daddy said, don't walk in bunches, walk separately. You see, it was easy to round up groups of people in a bunch. Well, it's after school, and I'm with my girlfriends, and we're walking in a bunch. How easy children forget. A truck driver came by, big truck, and he yelled, halt! 2 of my girlfriends ran into the field and they shot. The last 3 of us were gathered up and put in the back of the truck. We were taken to a train station. We were put in a cattle car. We were standing up like matchsticks. And we ended up, the train ended up in Auschwitz. So in the booklet, Katie explains her entire harrowing story, but I'm just going to touch on a little bit. So she gets onto the car, they get off in Auschwitz. And so what they did was they asked people, they lined them up and they separated them and all this kind of stuff. And she got to an area where they had them take off all their clothes, walk up 2 flights of stairs, and then SS men would evaluate them for diseases. So if you were dirty, you went with that group. If you were deemed not dirty, you went with that group. She ended up going with that group, not dirty. She said, well, where are they going? None of your business. They're going to be gone. So that brings us to the first quilt scene right here. You notice there's a naked bodies up here. Can you go to that first quilt scene on the side? There you go. So my mom said she modeled for that. She gave us, and she took 10 pounds off her. But she got in front of the mirror and she modeled herself with that. As you notice, she is putting on a belt. So here's what she said about that. We were taken to have a shower. The instructions were to put on a wide leather belt with a handle on the back. The shower would fumigate and delouse our bodies. There were 3 shower rooms. They were about 30 by 40 each, as big as a house. So they put 200 people in the first shower room, shut and locked the doors. They put 200 people in the second shower room, shut and locked the door. Then there was like 19 people left, and she was in that 19 group. And they put them in there and shut and locked the door. They got on these belts, and then it was up to the people in the shower to turn on the water. All of a sudden, they could hear screaming from the other rooms, screaming. And the shower heads looked like fire extinguishers. So she asked, so all of a sudden, screaming, all of a sudden her door opened up. And the SS said, get out. Take off your belts and get out. She said, well, what happened to the other people? They're gone. Gassing 19 people was not an efficient use of the crayon gas that they used. So she got to live. So I used to live in Colorado. My mom would come down and visit me. And for some reason, this woman had heard about my mom, her stories, and she contacted me if I could bring my mother over to interview her about her life. Her name is Helen Fireman. She met us at the door of her Denver home. She extended her hand, and there was her Auschwitz number right there. She had been trying to tell her children her story, and her children would have nothing to do with it. They go, Ma, that's in the past. We don't want to hear about it. She needed a neutral person to talk with. You need a cup of coffee. You need to sit across the table from each other. My mom brought a tape recorder. They sat and talked for 3 or 4 hours. I wasn't with them. I took off. I went shopping and whatnot, just left them alone. She just needed that private time. And so Helen Fireman, once this storytelling was all over, my mom took the tape out, gave it to Helen. She put it in an envelope and she marked it for my grandchildren upon my death and put it in her safety deposit box. So we're going to go to the next scene. This one. Thank you. So Helen said, you know, my experiences in the concentration camp, they were like everybody else. You know, we didn't have food, we didn't have clothing, it was freezing, and we were moved so often we weren't able to make acquaintances with anybody. Food was a big part of the terrible confinement. There were always terrible punishments. There were 8 crematoriums at Auschwitz. They were run by slave labor. My husband's brother was forced to work at one, and he was forced to see his relatives burned. They were fired up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The slave laborers had to also dig mass graves. They saw the worst of the worst. There was cannibalism in the men's camp, but none that I knew of in the women's camp. Right above, right, let's see, hold on. Right above Montana is Calgary, Alberta. And there was a woman, I know she's gone now, her name is Eva Brewster. And if you've been in, she wrote many, many books about her time in the concentration camps. Eva Brewster, you can find her books in the library right now to this day. And she started writing her books when she heard some professor somewhere say that the Holocaust was a joke. And so she started to write. Oh, if you think this is a joke, let me tell you something. She was a German Jew. My mom went up to Calgary, straight up from Cupcake. And she told this one short story. She said, my husband and my 3-year-old daughter were torn from me, each to a different camp. Your 3-year-old off to a different camp. One day, I felt delirious. This is the scene right here. The crematorium is surrounded by barbed wire and dogs. And she said, I felt delirious one day, lack of food, lack of water. And I went to the Blakova. Blakova is the woman who guards the women's camp. And I said to her, please, let me go to the transport today. I want to see my husband and my daughter. She was just delirious. And the Blakova said to her, are you out of your frickin' mind, lady? I'm in charge here. If a transport was coming in here, I would know all about it because I have to then do exercises in the yard, find out who can't do exercises, send them over to block 24, the gas chamber area, so that I can make room for new people coming in. So don't give me this, the transport is coming in today. She turned, Eva turned and ran. She ran to the fence. She ran, she said, I went to the electric fence to piece to oblivion. Oh God, the acid stench of the crematoriums was choking her. She said, let me get out, let me get out. She ran until she could run no more. She just fainted on the ground. When she came to, 2 prisoners were trying to give her some hot tea, meaning warm water, grass, or grass heated in warm water, or a mix of foodstuffs in warm water, whatever was on hand. You know, you would go crazy too, if you were in that situation. Our next scene is, where did it go? It's way down here on the floor. So what do we see here? We see an airplane, we see houses, we see fire, we see a little girl here in a red coat. Elizabeth Goff, she says, I will always remember the day the nuns whipped me because I could not give my lesson. I had studied. I knew my lesson. But then, on the way to school, I was walking holding my mother's hand. An airplane flew overhead. Recently, the streets had all been freshly tarred. A nurse and her little girl were tiptoeing through the tar across the street to get to school. Just then, that airplane that was flying overhead started dropping incendiary bombs. The street exploded in flames. The nurse and the little girl in the middle of the street couldn't go anywhere. They were stuck in the tar. So Elizabeth and her mother stood there, frozen, watching the nurse and the little girl burn to death in the middle of the street. That's why she got whipped, for not remembering her lesson at school. We'll go to the next one. Okay.
Jean, do you want me to open the
Yes.
words of the white one? Yes.
I think, yes, please do, you know. Yeah, the white ones right here. That's, so Carol's gonna open the doors to the crematorium. Just stab it right somewhere in the plate. Really good stab. There you go. Perfect. Thanks, Carol. Perfect.
What
All right.
about the next one? That's.
I don't have that. So this scene and this scene are one of, so that one shows the door open. Oh, Carol, you might as well open up these doors as well. Thank you. So, all of these women had written their stories to Mom. And so I took, you know, she had a whole file, she had all the stories there. I typed up the stories as the women wrote them to my mom. So she wasn't just making these up over a cup of coffee or something. And so, but this particular scene got on the quilt and there was no written story. I went through every sheet of paper that my mom had and couldn't find it. But from my history, from all the history that I watched and read and whatnot, I knew the story. I knew it. So I'm telling you on behalf of Hildegard Hepner, who is from Poland. And she said, finding places to hide was paramount and a constant worry. Most people were more afraid of Hitler than they were of the enemy. The enemy comes, the enemy goes, they starve us, they beat us, they rape us, but they go. We're glad that they're gone. Hitler didn't. He stayed, and he tortured, and he stayed. Families were known to plaster family members into walls, lock them in cabinets, hidden in tunnels or basements, with the promise to come back and get them. But caught up in the machine of war, they never came back to unlock the door. So Hildegard said that her mother had a root cellar where she kept her secret supply of potatoes to last through, the time. Keeps the potatoes away from the villagers and the enemy in order to get through these lean times. And she devised a hidden bed behind the potato bin with blankets and pillows. At night, she would tuck his children into bed in the potato salad. It was pitch black in there when she kissed us goodnight, blew out the candles, and shut and locked the potato bin door. In the morning, when there was an all clear, she would light a candle, wake us children up, and take us home into the house for breakfast. Of course, the worry was whether the enemy, or worse, Hitler, came in the night to take our mother away. We children would have been locked in there alive had they done that. But it was a chance mother had to take to keep us safe. We'll go down to the next. So here we have a Russian soldier. Got his arm out like this, and his pant leg up like this. He's down here on the floor right here. Elizabeth Goff. My family is really strange. We often find humor in the worst of the worst. And she's all down the stairs, we all laugh, but it's a way of releasing pent-up anxiety or feeling is to laugh. So when people laugh at strange, you watch videos all the time where people get bonked on the head or fall off the ladder, and we laugh, but we know that that must have been very painful. So my mom was always trying to find a touch of relief in all these stories. So Elizabeth Goff was, she said, it didn't take them long to discover that the Russian officers and soldiers were illiterate, completely illiterate. I think they received their commission and ranking through brutality. We're seeing that right now. We took advantage of this. One of the things we did was to tell them that our wrist compasses, you went to the 5 and dime, you had a little compass with a little, elastic band. We had them all the time. We couldn't read the compass, but we would get them at the 5 and dime store. They were probably 5 or 10 cents a piece. But they had wrist compasses, and the Russians didn't have watches, and the Russians were crazy about watches. So the kids sold their wrist compasses to the soldiers and told them they were wrist watches. And the soldiers went crazy and they bought them as many as they could get, and they would string them up their arms and they'd string them up their legs. And they felt that they were rich with wrist watches. We'll go to the next scene. Now, when you're sitting around talking and sharing your humanity and your stories with people, my mom ended up talking with Ophelia Alexander Russell. She was from Latvia. She was an real elderly woman. And she shared with my mom about her teen years during World War One. It just comes out. She says, when I was 16, World War One broke out in Latvia. My father had died when I was 9. So when the war broke, we left everything and fled to the mountains. The very first hospital I ever saw were in tents in the mountains. I started my nursing training there. I became a Red Cross nurse, and therefore we had no partiality to either army. The saddest part of my job was writing letters home from the dying patients. Now, officers would barge into the tents and they would say, "Get these men up, we gotta get them out to the front lines." She said, "Well, you have to identify them." They couldn't because she had taken all their identification papers and threw them in the wood burning stove. Then another bunch of army would come in and say, "These are all prisoners of war." And she said, "Identify them." And they couldn't because all their papers were burned up in the stove. She said, "We saved so many men from being sent to Siberia or going back out on the front." She ended up as a nurse in the Great Falls Hospital and retiring at the end of her, nursing career, and was a good friend of my own. So that's underneath there, that's just hay. That's hay. That's not fire, that's hay. But when you're only dealing with scraps and stuff, you do the best you can. So we'll go to the next story. Okay. This story is entitled "The Tragedy of War." You can see we have a ship. We have water. We have heads bobbing around. So Maureen Nielsen was from Great Britain, and she's a child survivor of Britain's attempt to save their children. She was a survivor of the surviving, trying to survive during war. She was 14 years old when Hitler tried to invade Great Britain. The situation was so serious that the government decided the least they could do in England was to save the children. They loaded a ship called the City of Phoenix, full of nurses, children, and nannies. But it was torpedoed shortly as it left the base and was able to live back to base. So they tried it again. They got a second ship called the City of Burners. This was again fully packed with nurses, children, nannies. This time, it did not leave the shore until it had assembled a convoy to escort it out to the North Sea. It was destined for Canada. The 100 convoy ships led the City of Burners out to the middle of the ocean, where they knew it was safe from submarines. The children were fed, put on their jammies, got them all tucked in for bed, settled down, and the North Sea began one of its famous North Atlantic storms. And the ship was just rocking and rolling. All of a sudden, after the convoy left, a torpedo hit the bow of the ship. They hustled the children in their pajamas up on the deck, got their life jackets on, and tried to get the lifeboats down the side of the rocking ship, like this. There were not enough lifeboats. Where have we heard that before? The high waves hampered the lowering of the lifeboats. Although most of the lifeboats were freed from the side of the ship, the waves were so bad that nurses could barely hold on to one child while holding on to the lifeboat. Half of the children were lost at sea. When daylight broke, a Norwegian freighter saw us bobbing around in the ocean in our lifeboats. This was all reported in the newspapers in 1939. We were ferried back to England, and we remained there for the rest of the war, out in the country, away from the cities. Well, that was Europe. Let's turn the chapter. Let's go over to the Philippines. What the world was happening over there? So, we have here we got the palm trees and we got, this scene reminds me of, what was that movie? Watch that. Yes, exactly. Thank you. So again, on the other side of the United States, we're battling another war over here. So Glindy Young was an American Army nurse. She was stationed in Hawaii during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And she told Mom just a real quick story. She said, I served as a nurse with the Red Cross in Hawaii during World War II. We were working out of camp and had no military or Red Cross uniforms. We commissioned to have identification uniforms sent to our post. When the uniforms arrived, they were the wool World War I nurses' uniforms, and then we had to wear them in the heat of Hawaii. Be careful what you. So I will not go into any of the tragedy at Pearl Harbor, you all know it, but rather we'll turn our attention to the real Japanese part, the Dutch East Indies in the Philippines. Pearl Harbor was a minor distraction to the United States to keep us busy. The Japanese wanted to secure the vast oil fields of the Philippines. At the same time, while bombing Pearl Harbor, the Japanese were headed to the East Indies. Several amazing stories came out of that calamity. One story, you librarians know this, is a book called Unbroken by Laura Hildebrand. Now, if you're in a book group, write this down. The survival of our Olympic gold medalist long distance runner, Luis Zamperini, who won the first place medal in the first Olympic Games held in Germany. After he went through the Olympics, he enlisted in the United States Marines, and he was stationed on a ship in the Philippines. The book, always read the book first, right? Me too. Always read the book first. Then they released it on the big screen in 2014. So both are captivating, both book clubs quality. The second story, survival story, was written by Helen Colgan, written in 1965. This book was entitled Song of Survival. It was Helen's memoir of her 3.5 years of surviving in the Japanese internment camp on Sumatra. Thousands of Dutch and British officers' wives, children, nannies, and nuns were interned while Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, all on December 7th, 1940. Made into a movie in 1997, starring Glenn Close, it was then called Paradise Road. Song of Survival, Paradise Road. And there is also a CD that goes with it. Now, it's a very long story. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I'm going to tell you 2 snippets that my mom gleaned out of her visit with Helen. My mom flew out to California. Helen was one of the last surviving survivors of these internment camps. She was about 80 then. They're all gone. My mom's gone. Helen's gone. And Helen said that 2 women must be given credit for saving their sanity. Margaret Drummond, a Presbyterian missionary, and Nora Chambers, a graduate of London's Royal Academy of Music. Margaret wrote down the entire works of composers such as Beethoven, Schubert, Chopin from memory. Nora arranged orchestral and piano pieces in 4-part harmony. These women made us into an orchestra choir. Why? To keep us focused and occupied so we would not die. We were physically starving. We had many different languages among us. We did not have a physical strength to stand. Each choir member had to find her own piece of stool to sit on while singing. We put on a concert about once a month, once every 2 months. The other part of the women who were not in the choir kept us alive as an audience cheering us on. We had to support each other. And Helen says, how well I remember. Thank you. Thank you. I need everybody with me. Thank you very much. How well I remember the very first concert. 30 singers filed into the corner space of the compound. Let's go to the next. Here we go. 30 singers filed into the corner of the compound. And Nora Chambers lifted her hands for the first measure of Largo. As the first notes floated through the air, the guard came running out of the guard hut with his bayonet fixed, yelling, "Whoa, whoa, halt!" But Nora kept conducting. The guard became so entranced that he quietly listened to the entire concert by seating himself in the front row. Soon the captain had a front row seat as well to the concert. He tried to get the women to sing his favorite Japanese songs, but that was a no-go, not even a beginner. The concert of voices also lifted into the air across the men's camp over the wires. And the men would crowd against the wires to hear the women's voices, which assured them that the women were still alive. It gave them peace. It gave them hope. Our next clip is the second clip that my mom put together in the camp. It's called Hunger. So here we have little children sitting here. We have little coconut bowls on a shelf. And we have a woman with a stick stirring in a dirty pot like this. So Helen described the hunger. We had water rations of 1 beer bottle of water per day. The Japanese were not prepared to feed prisoners of war. They expected us to forage for food in the jungle. We're not cows. There's very little to eat in the jungle for humans. They actually expected us to kill ourselves as noble prisoners should do, but we didn't. When the children became too weak to have school classes or to play, they would just sit around the makeshift kitchen and think about what would be on the menu for today, every day, which was always the same. Soon they were too weak to even think, just sit. Boys would stay with their mother until they were 12, and then they were taken from her and brought over to the men's camp, not knowing if there was a father or a relative there to take care of it. Can we just take a breath here? Let's turn the page, the chapter over. Let's go to liberation. You know, we need some levity here to bring this back up, because the war is finishing. There is peace at the end. So we'll wrap this up. We're going to go back to Helen Fireman in Denver, who was having her story taped by my mother. Let's go to this one. Yeah, but would you open this little door right here? Here we go. Let's give a hand for my assistant here. Yeah, thank you. So there's three little girls sitting here by the door. When the war was over, 1944, 1945, 1946, depending upon what country you were in and how quickly, Hitler and people got out. It was the beginning of yet another nightmare. Where were our families? We all promised that we would find each other after the war. We would try to make it home to Poland if we could. The gates of the camp were thrown open and we were free to go. Okay, they unlocked the gate. Goodbye. Thanks for coming. Glad you survived. Go home now. Now, Germany is about the size of Montana, Montana being one of the three largest states in the Union, Alaska, Montana, and Texas. So it's a big state, it's a big country. There was no communication after the war, no telephones, no cell phones, no laptops, no anything. And there were poster walls where you could reach for notes or leave a note for a family member, or a family member could leave a note for you, and you would scour these notes. My sisters and I started walking home. As we were boarding the train towards Poland, someone called my name. Helen, Helen, I know where your mother's at. 4 days later, we reached her home in the middle of the night. We did not dare knock on her door in the night, which is how the Nazis would capture people, in the middle of the night, unawares. In the morning, our mother opened her door. She saw us three huddled on the porch. She looked at us. We looked at her. She nodded her head and she said, I knew you would be here today. We later found my little brother, and I did find my husband. We never found Daddy. Okay, let's go down to our next scene. This is called a window on surrender. Josephine Nordstrom, a German immigrant. She shared several cups of coffee and talked a lot about her little village in Germany. So here we have a little girl looking out her window up in the attic. We have this soldier coming down, and all the windows on all the little houses have white sheets over it, so you can't see him. So Josephine said, we heard the gossip that the war just might be over. But we were told that the Americans were coming to shoot us, so we should die like brave Germans. So we waited. Now, Daddy made us stay indoors and cover the windows. We were not ready to die for the fatherland just yet. I crept up to the attic and peeked out. It wasn't long before I saw a soldier coming down the street. He was so big. He was so fat. He was black. I had never seen a black man before. He had a large knife in his teeth, and he walked like a rooster, real slow, through the village. Then Daddy caught me, and he yelled, get out of that window. Don't you know those Americans have binoculars? They can see everything. They'll shoot us all. But they didn't. The soldier just went down the street, and pretty soon more soldiers came. Now, see, this is the eyes of a little girl. She said, they looked like they were eating something. I had never seen anybody chew gum before. Of all the women that lived on Fifth Avenue for short periods of time, Anna Bleckinger became one of my mom's most favorite and dear friends. Anna Bleckinger is from Germany, an immigrant from Germany. She married an American Polish. She was here. And she told my mom many stories over the years. Anna's little brother was named Fritz. So when my mother gave birth to my little brother, my mom named him Fritz in solidarity and friendship with her friend Anna Bleckinger. So we're going to go to the next scene called Sweet Surprise. Right here. So we've got a little girl, her hands are up in the air. We've got a baby buggy, a soldier, a tank. We're in an alley. We're in a tight squeeze. Now, during the war, Anna's mother worked in a German munitions plant, and Anna stayed home to take care of her baby brother Fritz. There were still air raid sirens going off, and she would take Fritz to the shelters. They were warned about the Americans coming. They were not to take any food from them because their food would poison and kill them. Well, out one day with Fritz in his buggy, she was in a small alley. She heard a rumbling, which did, was it like a tank? There was no place to hide. So she didn't know what to do, so she threw her hands up against the wall, in surrender, closed her eyes really tight, waiting for the bullets to fly, and waited. The tank stopped. There was a rustle. There were boots walking on the cobblestone. Then the tank took off again. When she dared open her eyes, the buggy was filled with Hershey bars. Now, being warned about foods from the enemy, she remembered her old uncle who had gotten her father in trouble with the SS during the war. She went to see her uncle and offered him a Hershey bar. She watched him greedily eat it, and then she waited. About 4 hours later, he was still the mean old man she has always known. So she decided all was well, and she used the rest of her Hershey bar stash to barter for food for her family. So our next story is the comforts of home. Now, these women, when my mother was interviewing them, they were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So a lot of their memories about the war were when they were very young children, teenagers and young children. So Maureen Nielsen, she was from Ireland. She described her time. And she said, Joel, the things I remember still concern me with home life as a child. I was 14, and there were soldiers all around us, American soldiers all around us. So I decided to extend an invitation to an American officer to come to our house for dinner. Now, my mother's big question was, what do Americans eat? Several women in the neighborhood were consulted. It was determined between them that Americans eat corn on the cob. Now, in Europe, corn on the cob is animal food. Well, cookbooks were consulted to no avail. So they went to a greengrocer in the village and inquired. Well, by golly, he just happened to have several ears of corn on the cob. And he advised that they should just boil it. Her mother started out early in the morning, big pot of water, put the ears of corn in to simmer all day. Occasionally, a neighbor would stop by and they would poke at the green stalks in the pot to see if they were getting any softer. And my mother's only comment was, well, if the Americans were as tough as the corn they eat, we will surely win the war. So we'll go to the next. Okay. So Maureen immigrated here and she came over on a boat. And she came from Ireland. And she remembers what this is called the Golden Door. How many of you have been to New York and you saw the Statue of Liberty? Mm. That's wonderful. And how many of you stood there and read the poem at the base? She says, Maureen says, no one that lives in this country can imagine what the Statue of Liberty means to an immigrant. The people will line the rails of the ship in silence. They each had their own reaction. Most of them just cried. Freedom at last. The base of the poem at the base of the Statue of Liberty was written by Emma Lazarus, written in 1883 when she was 34 years old. And Emma Lazarus was one of America's first immigrant Jewish women poets. This piece was installed on Lady Liberty after Lazarus' death in 1887 as a tribute to her. And it's called The New Colossus. Now, I had to look up the word Colossus, but you know, I know how to use a dictionary. I didn't even bother to go to the computer. And Colossus just means giant, big, huge.
Colossal, yeah.
So I'm going to read to you the poem, The New Colossus. Not like the brazen giant Greek fame with conquering limbs from land to land. Here, on our sea-washed sunset gates, shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose fame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exile. From her beaconed hand blows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that Twin Cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp. She cries with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your hungry masses yearning to be free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest tossed, to me. I lift my lamp at the golden door. Every one of us is an immigrant. Never forget. Every one of us is an immigrant. I have a few tiny little stories to finish this up. So Irene Nelson from Denmark. She said, my mother was head of the resistance in our little village in Denmark. She taught us the sabotage. Come, children, time to make moms around the table, clear the table. So our village had a small rickety jail. It was seldom used until the Nazi occupation. Then soon the building was full to overflowing with our young men from the villages. It wasn't too bad though. They sawed the window bars off, and every night after bed check, they would slip out and do the sabotage. And then they'd climb back in the jail and spend the rest of the day lying around sleeping. So one day, Denmark declared that the war was over. Sorry. And I heard someone say, what will we do for excitement now? Well, as per our Jewish custom, when someone dies, attendees at the funeral will say, may their memory be a blessing or anything. Thank you for letting me present. Instead, under one of these chairs is a business card with the word winner put on it. So it could be an empty chair or your chair or somebody's chair.
I think it's
And if you have the empty, if you have the winner card, you can come over to the table and choose a book of your choice.
Or you would have grabbed it. Are there any questions, please? Would you wait for a minute? Could we wait till 20? Sit down.
Yeah, I know.
Chaos. Oh, yeah, check it out. We have dinner. Dinner. If you have any questions, you can just meet me over here and we can sit.
Okay.
You can sit over there too.
Okay.
Are the ladies that are doing their raffle, they want to come up? Or you guys know?
Okay, I'm from the Maple Grove Quilt Guild. This is, okay, I'm from the Maple Grove Quilt Guild. And our raffle quilt out there is a one of a kind quilt that was designed by Carrie Shell. Our
Nice.
guild, so there will not be a pattern for it. Our tickets are $2. Our quilt show is May 1st and May 2nd. And it will be held this year at the Edinburgh Golf Course because the Maple Grove Community
Yeah.
Center is under renovation.
Okay, so can you take?
So if you know other people that like to come to our show, please let them know about the change in location. Because what we're thinking is gonna happen, of course, is people will go to the Maple Grove Community Center. And will not be there. So, it seems like the Edinburgh Golf Course is gonna be a nice place to have it. They have a great big room there. They have lots of parking. On 85th and Brooklyn Park. Yes. So our show is May 1st, again, at 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is a Friday, and then Saturday, 9 to 4. So hope you come.
Okay, we will take a 15-minute break. It's 11 o'clock, so we'll try to come back quarter after 11. Go some coffee. Come to the raffle. There's merchandise to buy. Looking for others. And talk to Jean. Sorry. Yeah. Jean.